When someone says luxury car, you might think of a Mercedes S-Class, or an Audi A8, or a BMW 7 Series. But should you now also think Citroen C5X? That's what we're in now, and in this review, we're going to look and see if Citroen's latest car is a fantastic and relatively affordable version of luxury transportation. So this new Citroen is based on familiar underpinnings which we've seen before in lots of other Citroen and Peugeot products, like the Citroen C5 Aircross and also the Peugeot 308. And in fact, this apparently is the same windscreen that you find on the 308. But the C5X takes those ingredients and gives us something a little bit different, because now this is a car that kind of sits across a few different classes, because it's as long as an estate car, but it's not quite a traditional estate because it's a little bit higher than most of those cars. But then again, it's not quite a traditional SUV either. So essentially, this is going to be seen as an alternative to estate cars like the Skoda Octavia estate, but also some large SUVs like the Peugeot 5008 and maybe even the Kia Sorento as well. Inside the C5X, the driving position is a bit higher than a typical estate car, but it's then not quite so high as you'd expect in a traditional SUV. But ultimately, whatever class of car this sits in doesn't really matter. The thing that's important is whether this is any good or not. And inside, there are lots of things that are impressive, starting with the driving position, because yes, it might be a bit in between an estate and an SUV, but fundamentally it is very good. In a C5 Aircross, you have a much more kind of upright, sit up and beg kind of driving position, but in the C5X, things just feel a bit more natural. You also get advanced comfort seats, which give you a memory foam lining, and these are pretty comfortable over long distances. It would just be a bit better if they had some more side support to hug you in, but still, this is a very comfortable place to sit. The only slight issue I have is the top of the steering wheel cuts off the top of the driver display for where I want to be sat driving. But otherwise, the driver display is nice and clear, fairly big, and on the dashboard here, you've got this really big touchscreen infotainment system. Now, on the upper trim levels, you have this big screen here, but on the entry-level trims, you do get a smaller one. The good thing about this screen is that it is big. The bad thing is the software itself. So you've got all these menus and sub-menus, and things aren't necessarily where you'd expect them to be. And it's the kind of system that is just going to take ages to really get comfortable with. So that's a shame, because there are a lot of other infotainment systems out there that are just simpler and better. And probably what you're going to do in the C5X is just get to Apple CarPlay or Android Auto as quickly as possible and hope that for most of the time you're in the car, you just stick on that and don't actually have to use the software that much. What is good though is below this, you've got physical buttons and dials for the climate controls, which is great because on older Citroen products, they used to put all of those in the touchscreen itself. So if you were driving, you'd have to dive into a really unresponsive and fiddly touchscreen infotainment system to just change the temperature of the car. But now Citroen is reintroducing these buttons and dials, which is great, and hopefully they'll continue to do that for their future products as well. The other thing that's great in here is just the look and the feel of everything, because it's got this pretty attractive layout, and it's not just how it looks, because there's loads of substance to it as well, and it's all really solidly put together. The materials feel good, high quality, you get some nice inserts as well, and it's very difficult to find anything that feels especially kind of budget or cheap feeling, or find somewhere where they really cut some corners, because it all feels really good, really solid, and built to last. And it's certainly as good as what you get in a Peugeot 5008, and for the money, it's only really a Mazda CX-5 that might feel a little bit more plush and better put together, and it's also definitely got a better infotainment system than what you get in the C5X. But really, especially considering the price, which we'll talk more about later, this is a very impressive interior. In the back, it's very impressive as well. You've got a big distance between the rear wheels and the front wheels, so legroom is really good. Even if you're especially long-legged, you'll have loads of room to stretch out and relax in. The only problem back here is potentially headroom, because on the outside of the car you can see it's got that nice swooping roof line down towards the back, but that does mean that in here it's a bit restricted in terms of headroom. Now, I'm just under 6 foot, and the driver's seat's in my driving position, by the way. If I sit up straight, I really don't have a problem, but I'm also aware there isn't much space above my head. If I was over 6 foot, then my head would be touching the roof lining here. Otherwise, this is a nice wide interior in the back here. You've got a nice wide seat base for this middle seat. Yes, there is a lump in the floor, but it's not particularly big. You've also got this armrest with 2 cup holders and a ski hatch, which gives you easy access to the boot and lets you put your skis through there, obviously. So generally in the back, it is impressive, particularly when it comes to rear legroom. But remember that this is up against very practical estate cars and SUVs, and lots of those rivals will offer better rear headroom than the C5X. But the thing to bear in mind is that it's not bad, it's just not incredibly generous for very tall adults. The C5X has an overall boot capacity of 545 litres, but if you go for the plug-in hybrid model that we've got here, then that overall capacity drops down to 485 litres. So you're left with what looks like a fairly shallow boot, and there isn't much in the way of underfloor storage either. But there are good things about the boot. So there's not much of a loading lip at the front here at all. It's also not too low to the ground, it's not too high off the ground, and you've got this big opening as well. So it should be relatively easy to load big, bulky, heavy items into the back of the C5X. And we were also able to fit 7 carry-on size suitcases into the back of the C5X, which is actually the same number that we could fit in the Skoda Octavia Estate plug-in hybrid. So that is a very practical plug-in hybrid, and this goes toe-to-toe for it in terms of boot space on offer. But when you consider this might also be a rival to the Peugeot 5008, because it's got a similar footprint to that car, then that has a much bigger boot. You can fit 10 carry-on size suitcases into it. But at this price point, looking at other plug-in hybrid rivals, other estate cars that this is up against, this is still quite practical. Now, a lot is often made of Citroens being incredibly comfortable, but the truth of it is that for a lot of their products, it's slightly overhyped. Because the fact is that yes, lots of Citroen's latest lineup have very soft suspension setups, but soft doesn't automatically mean comfortable. But with the C5X, it does actually mostly live up to the hype for its ride comfort. So yes, it is very soft, but it feels like it's got tighter body control than a Citroen C4 and certainly a C5 Aircross as well. So that means that you do have a nice kind of floating sensation to the ride, and it does feel very smooth, especially on the motorway, but it still also feels pretty well tied down, so you're not kind of constantly moving and feeling slightly nauseous as a result of it. So we're on a terrible bit of road now, but the initial bump absorption from all these broken bits of road that we're travelling over is really good. And yes, the car does move around over these rough surfaces, but it settles down relatively quickly afterwards as well. So this is very comfortable compared to the other cars that this is up against at this kind of price range, certainly. Now, we're in a plug-in hybrid C5X, and that has active damping, which means on each corner there are sensors that are constantly monitoring the road, and it also monitors your driving style, and it adjusts the suspension on each wheel to try and make things as comfortable as possible. Now, I haven't driven a C5X without this suspension setup, but I can tell you that this, especially for a plug-in hybrid, is very comfortable. Now, it's not a Mercedes S-Class and it's not perfect, but it is very impressive, and it does live up to the comfort hype around this car. The downside to all of this is that it's definitely built for comfort rather than speed, because it's not amazing in terms of handling. With that soft suspension setup, it means if you go for quick changes of directions in the car, then you can feel it really throwing its weight from one side to the other, and it just doesn't feel as agile as a proper estate car that's lower than this and offers better body control. Now, there are 3 engines to choose from with the C5X. There's 2 petrols and there's 1 plug-in hybrid. For the petrols, you've got the PureTech 130, and you've also got the more powerful, more expensive PureTech 180. And we now are in the hybrid 225. This C5X gets a 178 brake horsepower 4-cylinder engine with a 109 brake horsepower electric motor, driving the front wheels through an 8-speed automatic gearbox. It also gets an official all-electric range of 37 miles, but in real-world driving you can expect that to be more like 25 miles. That's broadly in line with the equivalent Skoda Superb estate, but the Octavia IV will officially cover more than 40 miles. So, the C5X is one of the most impressive new Citroens for a long time. It's comfortable, nice inside, and very well priced. Whether you're looking for an estate car or an SUV, or a slice of luxury at the lower price range of the market, it's definitely worthy of consideration. For more information on the C5X and to save yourself some money on buying one, go to whatcar.com. But before you go, subscribe to our channel to see all of our other new car reviews as soon as they go live.